friends, and welcome back to Planetary Potion. Ash here to take you through the 2-week period of March 24th through April 6th. And let me just say, it is a doozy. This might be a long one. There's a lot happening and a lot to cover. Big couple weeks in the sky. And just in case you had missed the announcement in the last one, Ty and I will be back with Unclouded Eye episodes that will dive into some interesting and kind of esoteric stories and weaving them with astrology. But the forecast is now going to live over here in these Planetary Potion episodes. So yes, Ty and I are on hiatus right now. We're taking a little spring break, but we'll be back soon. So looking forward to that. But the forecast is now going to live here. So we're going to count down the planets. We're going to move from the least active planet down to the most active planet. So let's get started with number 10, shall we? Number 10 for the second episode in a row is Jupiter. Jupiter's at the bottom of the list yet again, but this time it is going through one major transit. Last time it had none, so it is increasing. And this is also a pretty good representation of the fact that this is a very active 2 weeks if our bottom planet still has an aspect happening. Last time we had a couple that didn't have any aspects, and this time we have one. So on April 6th, which is actually the end of the period we're looking at, we have the one Jupiter aspect happening, and the sun is going to sextile Jupiter. So April 6th is a Sunday, and this aspect is happening at 5:44 a.m. Eastern Time. The sun will be at 16 degrees of Aries, so just about halfway through Aries season when this occurs, and Jupiter will be at 16 degrees of Gemini. And this is a very positive transit that we feel all day on this Sunday, and it is very optimistic. It helps us to see the big picture, think about things in a little bit of a brighter way. We might be feeling more expansive, more ready for adventure, and we could be more generous with our time and energy, wanting to treat those around us. There's more of a generosity of spirit, a curiosity that's kind of guiding us through the day. So really good couple weeks for Jupiter. It's just at the bottom of the list because everything else has so much happening. So buckle up. Let's talk about number 9. Number 9, we have Pluto. Pluto only has one transit happening as well, but it is extra important because this is a transit that's tied in with Mercury retrograde. So this is happening on March 25th. We have Mercury sextiling Pluto. So this is the second time this transit has happened in the last month, and that is because Mercury is retrograde. So on March 5th, Mercury sextiled Pluto, but then Mercury stationed retrograde, and it moved backwards, and now it is meeting back up with Pluto and sextile again. So this is occurring on Tuesday, March 25th, we have our big Pluto transit. So at 6:02 p.m. Eastern Time on this Tuesday, the 25th, we have Mercury, which is currently retrograde, sextiling Pluto. Mercury is presently at 3 degrees of Aries, so it's getting back through the early degrees of Aries. We're just a few days away from it moving back into Pisces, which will happen. We're going to talk about that more later in the episode. And Pluto is currently at 3 degrees of Aquarius. It is very slow moving, so that's why it's just kind of stationed here at the beginning degrees of Aquarius, which is why Mercury has just been moving kind of around it and kind of triggering these different transits. So Mercury sextile Pluto is going to be really felt that one day, that Tuesday the 25th. And this is a very investigative transit. It makes us want to see below the surface, to understand things on a deeper level. It's kind of considered like a detective aspect where you want to kind of dig in and put pieces together and not take things at surface value. And it's a positive one because this is a sextile. But the thing we have to keep in mind is that Mercury is retrograde, so there could be some element of the past that is involved, or having to repeat something that kind of started around March 5th. So if you remember what you were doing on March 5th or around that time, there could be some repeated elements of having to put pieces together and having to kind of dig to understand something that began back at the beginning of the month. So you can kind of see this is a slightly more involved aspect than the Jupiter one, which is why we have Pluto at number 9. Now let's talk about number 8. Number 8, we have Mars. And Mars is pretty active, actually. Again, like this is a loaded 2-week period. So the fact that we have 3 major Mars transits and it's pretty much at the bottom of the list of active planets just tells you that this is going to be a doozy. So the first one is actually happening. There's 2 transits happening the same day. So Mars is going to be sextiling Uranus and trining Saturn on April 4th. And we actually have an aspect forming in the sky that day that is something called a minor talent triangle. This is a Friday, April 4th. We have this triangle forming in the sky between Saturn, Uranus, and Mars. So Saturn and Uranus are going to be sextiling one another. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the episode when we talk about one of those planets, but just kind of try to picture it. So those 2 are connecting to each other in the sky, and then Mars is forming a trine over to Saturn and a sextile over to Uranus. This is actually a really positive transit, and it's a big one too because Saturn and Uranus are making a contact that they don't often make. But we're specifically just talking about Mars right now. So we're going to talk about how Mars is playing into this. And Mars is giving this transit a boost. It is injecting it with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And what I will say, just to kind of give you an impression of what's to come, Saturn and Uranus are very opposite in a lot of ways. Saturn is all about discipline and dedication and responsibility and kind of taking things one step at a time and being very diligent. Whereas Uranus shakes things up. It's more chaotic and more surprising, and it doesn't like routine. So very strange kind of dynamics when you have them together, but it's a positive thing. And Mars is injecting a lot of energy and the need to kind of take physical action. So this makes this a very good day to work on creative endeavors, to do group projects, to do anything related to a new business or some kind of project that you need some inspiration and dedication for. Because not only do you have the kind of random ideas coming in from Uranus, you also have the discipline and the focus coming in from Saturn and the energy to make it happen coming in from Mars. So April 4th is a really good day for that type of thing, but you're going to be able to feel it for a few days leading up. I would say from the end of the week before, or rather, I guess the beginning of that week. So around Monday the 31st through like Wednesday the 9th. So it's really going to be about a 10-day period. You're going to feel this transit. So it's really a nice one to take advantage of. And it's one of the more positive transits we have going on in the next 2 weeks. And 2 days after that, Mars makes another transit when it trines Venus. So on Sunday, April 6th, which again is the last day we're looking at in this episode, at 8:13 a.m. Eastern Time, Venus, which is currently retrograde, is going to trine over to Mars. At this point, Mars is at 25 degrees of Cancer and Venus is at 25 degrees of Pisces. So this is what we would call a water trine because both of them are in water signs when they trine each other. Fun, quick astrology fact: if planets are trining, it means that they are currently in the same element sign. So this is water. So Venus trine Mars, we're going to feel for pretty much Saturday, Sunday, maybe a little bit into Monday, but mostly on that Sunday, the 6th. And this is a really good transit for being very passionate and engaging with your interests and maybe being a bit playful and competitive in relationships. And because Venus is retrograde, there could be some element of energy coming in from the past, whether that's a friend you haven't seen in a while or a past lover or maybe a past creative project, because Venus can also be associated with artistic projects and beauty and our creativity. So there could be some energy coming in to work on something from the past or some energy coming in to kind of move on from the past. Either way, this is a positive transit that could kind of inject our Sunday with a need for socializing and a need to be passionate. It's a great day for like competitive sports with other people that you're friends with or that you're dating or married to. Really good day for that, or playing games together, just kind of engaging in that sort of competitive energy of Mars, but with people that you care about, which is that Venus arc of that. All right, so let's talk about number 7. In 7th place this week, we have Uranus. So Uranus is not inactive by any means. As I mentioned, everything after this point is very active, but I'm just trying to make some judgment calls here and rank them because that's part of our Planetary Potion game. So this 2-week period, we have the sextile between Saturn and Uranus on April 4th. And I talked about that a little bit in the Mars section just because Mars does engage with that by sextiling and trining each of those. But let's talk a little bit more about Saturn sextile Uranus because this is a really big transit. It's really coloring the energy of this spring, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, this autumn. So this is a transit that is felt for usually a few weeks, like 2 to 3 weeks, because these planets move very slowly. So we probably felt this starting to build like a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. And it's going to be the strongest on April 4th, but then it continues to kind of be felt through the next couple weeks of April. And Saturn sextile Uranus, as I mentioned before, is really wonderful for taking these like fresh ideas and really devoting yourself to making them a reality, because you have the vision and the unusual eccentricity of Uranus, but you have the discipline and the focus of Saturn, and they are working together to help you to really make something a reality. So Uranus on its own is full of wonderful ideas. It shakes things up. It throws a routine out the window, but sometimes nothing can get done because it's just so chaotic. And when it's all Saturn and there's nothing else happening, it can be all work and no play. It can be a little dry or just uninspired at times. So the two of them are working together to kind of take out all of that negativity that can be associated with each of those planets on its own. They're really teaming up here. So this is a wonderful transit for April that we can use to our benefit to make things happen and to do so in an inspired fashion. So love this for us. So then number 6, of course, is Saturn. So we had Uranus and Saturn. They're pretty much on the same level here. We get pretty much the same stuff happening. Saturn is sextiling Uranus and trining Mars on April 4th, and that's all that minor talent triangle that we talked about. So Saturn is just ranked slightly ahead just because it is moving a little quicker and we are feeling more of that Saturnian energy. and it is kind of taking the best parts of Saturn and allowing us to utilize it to our benefit. And the cool thing about Saturn, too, is it's in Pisces right now. So there is this dreamlike quality to it. And there's this feeling of wanting to maybe add more structure and discipline to the imagination. Now, that could be both good and bad, because the imagination part of what makes it wonderful is that it is a little bit untethered and unmoored, and to kind of carve out more sense in it can make it feel a little overly tamed or just kind of watered down. But the thing about this 2-week period is we're really getting the opportunity to take these visions and make them into something real, but in a way that doesn't feel like it's sucking all the fun out of things. So this is kind of best case scenario Saturn wise, which is why I'm placing Saturn at number 6. All right, let's talk about number 5. Number 5, we have the sun. So it feels a little weird to rank the sun lower on the list, just because, of course, the sun is always the most important. It's the star of the show in our solar system, clearly. But we're, of course, ranking by the number of big astrological transits that are happening this 2-week period. And we have 3 to discuss today. So on March 24th, we have the sun conjuncting Mercury. And this is interesting. This is an interesting one because Mercury is currently retrograde. So on Monday the 24th at 3:48 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the sun at 4 degrees of Aries meeting up with Mercury, which has retrograded back in with the sun. And this is what is called Mercury Cazimi, which means the heart of the sun. And this is a transit that we really feel on just the day that is in question here. So Monday the 24th. And this is a really good time for getting new ideas, or because Mercury is retrograde, maybe an idea returns to you. There is an association with this transit and geniuses. It's said that a lot of people that are considered geniuses or ahead of their time in some field are born when Mercury is Cazimi. So similarly, there could be some baby geniuses being born somewhere in the world today on this day, but there could also be some ideas that are coming in that are very helpful and insightful. So I would specifically pay attention to the time between 1:48 p.m. and 5:48 p.m. Eastern Time, that 4-hour window. You might notice that there's some very interesting insights coming in. But the thing about these insights is they are fleeting. They come and then they go. So being sure that you're taking time to maybe jot down some ideas, tell someone your thoughts, or maybe even do a quick voice memo. I live for the voice memo. If you've gotten a reading from me, you get it. That's my love language is voice recordings. Okay, so next one with the sun, we have the solar eclipse happening on March 29th. And we're going to talk about that more when we get to the moon section, because a solar eclipse is technically a lunar event as well. And we're going to kind of talk about it more in the moon section. But what I will say is that with a solar eclipse, there is this sense of the lunar energy sort of taking over, because it is casting a shadow on the sun. So on this day, solar energy is kind of out, which is more of that sort of like yang energy. If you think about a yin yang, like there's this, the yang side is more active and problem solving and taking action to fix things and using our left brain to kind of figure things out. And kind of this big, bold, egoic energy that the sun can sometimes represent. I mean, of course, in just the most basic of archetypes, the sun is very multifaceted. But the moon is more about our intuition and our subconscious. So that's sort of taking over on that day. We're going to talk about that a lot more soon. then on April 6th, if you remember, we started this episode off by talking about the Sun sextile Jupiter. So this was the day on the 6th when there's a lot of optimism in the air, a lot of confidence and generosity and adventurous energy. So the Sun is interplaying with all of these planets, and it is in Aries during this time, which we talked about more in depth last episode. And the Aries Sun is very dynamic, it's very independent and fierce, and all about taking action and not waiting around, being impulsive and maybe being a little impatient. So yeah, the Sun is number 5 this week. And at number 4, we have the moon. So the moon is very active this time. We are still in eclipse season, and we're going to be until this solar eclipse. So this is taking place on March 29th, and this is a partial solar eclipse. So it's not going to cover the entirety of the sun, but we will experience a partial covering that will be visible in parts of Eastern North America, Western Europe, and Northern Africa and Asia. So you might be able to catch a glimpse of that. And that is happening on Saturday, the 29th at 6:57 a.m. Eastern Time. And so this is a new moon. Anytime we have a solar eclipse, that happens on a new moon, and lunar eclipses happen on a full moon. So this new moon is in Aries, and the sun and moon are meeting at 9 degrees of Aries. So we are technically in the first kind of portion of the sign of Aries, the season of Aries. And this is a really potent new moon for awakening inner desires. You could be feeling like you're waking up from hibernation, you're kind of shaking off the slumber, and there could be this feeling of like revitalization happening. You could be feeling very impulsive and impatient and really feeling all of that Aries energy building up inside of you, maybe even some frustration and anger and annoyance. Like all of that is very Mars and very Aries. And so to have that kind of exaggerated within a eclipse, like this is going to be really potent. So we might be feeling kind of like this cauldron sort of bubbling inside of us that could cause us to be a little more impatient with others. We could snap more. We're really needing some time to ourselves to process this and to have the space to figure it out. The 29th is not a good day for socializing. It's not a good day for being around big groups of people. It's more like you can go out and do stuff in the world, but you need to be free to move. You need to be free to make your own choices. You need to be free to listen to your own inner compass. If you have to like talk to like 4 different people about what they want to do, you will lose your mind. You all will. So everyone just kind of needs to do their own thing. If you can be with people that are respectful of that and totally open to that, then that's fine. But you need to be free to do your own thing. So there is a really transformational window happening with this eclipse, and it's very fiery. It could feel intense. It could almost feel like you're wielding a lot of power within yourself. There's a lot building up that's coming about on this day. You might not know how to harness it. Not everyone is going to know what to do with that power, but the key here is to trust it, to be bold, to be confident, and to don't try to dampen your power. Don't try to make yourself weak or lesser than, or claim to know less than you do. Like, just be who you are unapologetically, as much as you can, as much as you feel safe being in the world. And recognize your own worth, recognizing that you don't need to shrink yourself to please other people. You don't need to please other people in general. Like, that has been such a big lesson for me over the last couple of years. I know that for the early part of my life, I was always so worried about upsetting people or getting them mad at me, and that meant that I always had to make myself available to other people to, make them happy. And the truth was, I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to do my own thing, and I didn't want to have to worry about that. But it was really hard to kind of break through. And I think as we get older, or as we become more aware of our own self-worth and who we are as people, it can be easier to not worry so much about that. Of course, that doesn't mean like be a jerk in the world, but like sometimes boundaries can be read as being a jerk, like having boundaries, and you sometimes have to be okay with that. My dad used to say, like, you can please some of the people some of the time, you can't please all of the people all of the time. So that is something it took me many years to fully kind of accept as true. I could accept it intellectually, but, kind of feeling it in my bones is a different thing. And this is a really good new moon for that type of energy, of like recognizing I can't please everyone, so I'm going to please myself. And I'm going to do what feels right to me. And that will make you all the more powerful and all the more ready to kind of level up. So that's why the moon is number 4 this week. And I will mention that this is closing out eclipse season on the 29th. We might feel some hangover of it into the first week of April. And I know different astrologers have different definitions as to what eclipse season proper is. For me, I always consider it starts with the first eclipse and then it ends with the second eclipse in a season. But as I mentioned, there could be some lingering effects of it. And so it just feels very potent. I've been having wild dreams this eclipse season. I don't know about you, but yeah, so that's number 4. Let's talk about number 3. Sitting at number 3, we have Venus. She's the planet of love and beauty herself, and she is 3rd in this week's Planetary Potion countdown of active planets. And Venus is retrograde right now and will be until the 12th. So next episode, we're going to talk about the end of Venus retrograde. But as for now, she's still going. She's still retrograde. And she's about to move back from Aries into Pisces. So on March 27th, that is a Thursday, we have Venus retrograding back into Pisces. So that's happening at 4:40 a.m. Eastern Time, and Venus will close out the retrograde here in Pisces, and then we'll take a little bit of time to move back into Aries. So we have Venus now back in Pisces. Venus really likes to be in Pisces, actually a little more than it enjoys being in Aries. Venus in Pisces is very dreamy. It's really all about seeing like the best in people and things, kind of viewing the world through a fantastical lens, like rose-colored glasses, and being able to just sort of dissociate from things that feel unpleasant. So it's a little dreamy, but it's also a little delusional at times in the more negative aspects of it. So with Venus retrograde here, be careful, because there is a tendency to romanticize the past, to romanticize things that have already come and gone, and to maybe get hung up on them. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to act on it. It doesn't mean you're going to be completely focused on the past, like 24/7. It just means maybe there's some things coming back around that you need to process, that you need to move through. It could be memories of friends or a relationship from the past. It could be memories of like a project or just something like that. And you might find that maybe you are hearing from someone from your past, or maybe it's just more in the dream space, like in the mental space of daydreams or dreaming at night. And that is a very Piscean way to kind of go about it. So there might be more of that. There might be more happening in kind of this subtle subconscious level rather than in life, but I think it could manifest for some. And Venus retrograde will definitely impact those with a lot of mutable placements this second part of the retrograde. So we were really feeling it for the cardinal people in the first half. So if you're an Aries, a Cancer, a Libra, or a Capricorn, you would have really been feeling Venus retrograde for the past couple weeks. But now we're going to have that switch up a little bit. So we're really going to be feeling it if you are a Gemini, a Virgo, a Sagittarius or a Pisces, you're going to be really feeling this that much more. So the second half is going to be maybe more to contend with as far as things from the past coming back around. And that's going to be true whether that's your sun sign, your Venus sign, or even your rising sign. You might notice that. The same day that Venus moves into Pisces, it conjuncts Neptune. So Neptune, we talked about last time, it's sitting at the 29th degree of Pisces. It has been there all month. And Venus is going to basically go back into Pisces and pretty much immediately conjunct into Neptune there. So this is happening at 9:13 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday the 27th. This is really, really dreamlike and very much untethered from reality, which could be fun. It could be very dreamy, very good for using your imagination, seeing things in a different light, really exploring and enjoying like fiction and fantasy. But let's say you have a meeting that morning and you have to present like facts and figures. It could be kind of challenging. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Like, what are you scheduled to do on the 27th? You might be spaced out. You might just be like staring off out at the clouds out the window. You might be feeling like you would just rather go listen to your favorite song. There could just be some distraction going on, or maybe some slight delusional thinking. So just making sure you are maybe getting a second opinion from a friend or a colleague, like before you dive into something that you feel really convicted about but weren't yesterday. That's the key here. So it's not to say that every action you make is going to be something you need to double check. It's like, is there something that you feel impulsively drawn to do on the 27th that you didn't on the 26th? Because that's the stuff you are going to want to really check in with yourself about and check in with other people about, maybe get a second opinion if possible. A few days later, on April 1st, Venus conjuncts the north node of the moon. So this is Tuesday, April 1st at 4:38 a.m. Eastern time, but we're feeling it all day on the 1st. And Venus conjunct the north node is a really good transit for new relationships, but Venus is retrograde. So typically I would say this is a great transit to meet someone new, to start a new relationship, or to make new friends, or to feel into like the type of people that are attracted into you today, whether it's like old friends or people that you're close to that are just very prominent for you this day. But the thing is, Venus is currently retrograde. So all of that stuff I just said is true, but there is this weird karmic layer to it too. Because Venus retrograde in this case, the North Node is a karmic point. It's all about like destiny and where our soul is being called to in this life, what we have yet to do, what we have yet to accomplish that our soul is kind of wanting to do. It's like our bucket list for this life, you know, like our soul's bucket list. So it's less like, I want to learn a language. It's more like, I want to break this karmic pattern that I've been tackling lifetime after lifetime. So Venus is here with relationship energy and it's meeting up with that North Node. So it's like, okay, here are some people that could help you on your journey. Here are some people who can help you to accomplish the things you want to do. Or maybe these are new people, or maybe it's like, oh, wake up and smell the roses. There's people all around you that would be very helpful in, you know, you both making these goals a reality. But because Venus is retrograde, there could be some karmic stuff that needs to be dealt with first. So the energy of this transit is different because Venus is retrograde, and that means that we might be having some relationship stuff come up that we need to clear so that we can move forward and make those bucket list soul items a reality. So you might find some relationship baggage stuff coming up around the first, and it just might need to be dealt with. And you might find that this is a good day to tackle it because of the energy of the North Node. The North Node is all about doors opening. It's also called the head of the dragon, so it kind of comes roaring in. It's got this fiery quality to it. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of a big karmic day on the 1st. And I know it's April Fool's Day. It's not a joke. Finally, on April 6th, Venus trines Mars, and we talked about that in the Mars section. That is that super passionate, kind of competitive energy for relationships. So That one is a kind of fun and playful way to end Venus's 2-week period here. All right, let's get to number 2. Number 2 is Mercury. Mercury's having a pretty active couple weeks, and it is at the top. It is retrograde still, not for too long. Mercury will be coming out of retrograde right after, like, basically the start of the next episode. So on April 7th, it will be coming out of retrograde. So this is the last 2 weeks of Mercury retrograde, but, still got some transits to make before it's done. And transits it's going to make. We've talked about a lot of them already, but let's just kind of run them down. So March 24th, we have the Sun conjunct Mercury, also known as Mercury Cazimi. That, of course, is the genius aspect that we talked about, where you might be having these kind of fleeting ideas coming in that you might need to write down or make a quick note of, just so you don't forget, because it's going to be like a 4-hour window of fresh ideas coming in. Then on March 25th, the next day, we have Mercury sextile Pluto. So keep in mind, Mercury's moving backwards through the degrees of Aries at this point, and it's going to sextile Pluto for the second time this month. And this is the detective aspect, where we're digging deeper. We're trying to find information, especially regarding something that happened earlier in the month. There's a connection between March 5th and 25th. Then on March 29th, we have Mercury moving back into Pisces. So just like Venus, Mercury is also moving back into Pisces this 2-week period. We have both of these kind of following a similar pattern with their retrograde. They're both moving from Aries into Pisces at around the same time. And actually, Venus is going in first on March 27th, and then 2 days later, Mercury follows back into Pisces. So Mercury in Pisces is very inward, a little more introverted, and a little more like lost in thought. So we might find ourselves more daydreamy, and we could be getting confused easy. You might find that the Mercury retrograde effect, like the first period of Mercury retrograde when it was in Aries, was more about like being impulsive and kind of just blurting something out and then having it maybe be taken wrong, or feeling frustrated, or more of that like impatient Aries energy coming through with Mercury, and that leading to confusion or leading to misunderstandings. Now that Mercury moves back into Pisces, we might find that we're getting confused by not understanding something, like not understanding or missing details. So you might find that your reading comprehension maybe isn't as great. You get a text, you might just read it wrong and act as if you know exactly what it said, but maybe rereading it could be a good idea because maybe you missed an important detail. There could be the tendency, rather than to say something like, oh, can you repeat what you just said, to just be like, oh yeah, no problem. And that could lead to a lot more confusion down the line. Like, let's say your boss gives you a project and you hear some of it, but you don't hear everything, but you just kind of run with the details you did hear and then try to do it anyway because you don't want to look dumb or something. Like, that could be really bad. So you might want to just clarify and be like, I'm sorry, could you maybe word that in a different way, or could you repeat that? Like, yeah, that might be a little awkward, but it will be way less awkward than down the line, and that could lead to a lot of confusion. So there's almost this like reverberation of confusion that can happen when Mercury is in Pisces in retrograde. So just something to be aware of. The other thing is that thinking that because you said something like through your body language that somebody's going to pick up on it. But please keep in mind that that is not always the case. Like, especially if your Mercury is in a water sign, mine is, and I'm always like, I thought I told them that, but it's like, frowning slightly at somebody isn't the same as being like, please don't do that. So, like you say it telepathically, or like you think you reply to a text, but you did in your head. That's all very Mercury and Pisces retrograde. So, and you might get annoyed because you're like, I replied to that. Why haven't they replied back? And then you look at your text and you're like, oh, I never actually did reply to that. I just replied in my head. So that's very Mercury retrograde in Pisces. And again, Mercury retrograde is going to impact those mutable signs more this time for the next 2 weeks. So again, that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces. If your sun, rising, or Mercury is in one of those signs, or multiple, you're going to be feeling it more. The cardinal signs got hit harder last time, or the last couple weeks. So now we are feeling it more for the mutable signs. Then on March 29th, the same day that Mercury moves into Pisces, it conjuncts Neptune. So if you listened to the Venus section, that was exactly what happened to Venus a couple days earlier. And now Mercury is having the exact same thing occur. So at 10:46 p.m. Eastern time, which is just about a half an hour after Mercury moves back into Pisces. So this is the 29th. This is Saturday. This is the same day as the eclipse. It's the same day as the new moon. We have Mercury moving back into Pisces and then conjuncting Neptune. This is a big day. And Mercury conjunct Neptune can make us very poetic and dreamy and really tapped into the more like imaginative and sensitive side of things, but it's really difficult for speaking up. It's difficult for confrontation or for being very logical and rational. So this day is really tricky. Saturday the 29th, like I would not advise being around a lot of people. I talked about that a bit when we were discussing the eclipse, and I'm just doubling down on it with all of this Mercury stuff going on. This is a good day to do things on your own or with like the people that you love and respect most in the world, who won't mind if you're kind of off in your own world, because this is a lot. This is a big day, and it's not a good day to like go to a party. It's not a good day to go to a family gathering. Like all of that is just, I would not. If you don't have a choice, like maybe you don't have a choice, there's something already scheduled. You're like, I'm going to a wedding that day. Like best thing I can do is tell you, or best thing you can do is just give yourself breaks. Give yourself frequent breaks to walk away from the group, to take 5, to stare up at the clouds for a few minutes on your own, to, have a stretch break in the bathroom where you're doing some deep breathing. You're going to need it. And if you can leave early to do something for yourself, I would recommend it. So just some things to keep in mind. Finally, on April 4th, on April 4th, Mercury is conjuncting the North Node. So again, Mercury is following Venus's path exactly. It's making all the same transits as Venus when it moved back into Pisces. Mercury is doing the same movement, the same thing. It's just a couple days behind. April 4th is a Friday, and that's the same day as that minor talent triangle that involves Saturn, Uranus, and Mars. That's a big day as well. April 4th and March 29th are probably the biggest days for this period, minus what we're going to talk about at the end. That's the other huge day. So at 2:53 a.m. Eastern Time, Mercury is conjuncting the North Node of the Moon. Mercury is still retrograde at this point in time, and this is happening at 27 degrees of Pisces. So Mercury and the North Node. Remember, the North Node is that karmic point in the sky. It is not an actual planet. It is literally just a point on the moon's orbit. And the North Node is kind of what governs the eclipses, the eclipse season, and the way that the moon moves around the Earth. And when Mercury meets that, it is giving us ideas that are going to be helpful to get us to those bucket list items. Remember those karmic bucket list items that I talked about earlier in the episode? This is going to be helpful to get us to that point. Like we're getting ideas, we're getting downloads, whereas Venus is more about like, here's some people who can help you on your journey. Mercury is more about like, here are some ideas that could be useful for you. Here's some thoughts, here's some process, or maybe you're drawn to communicate and use your words, which will help you later on. Again, Mercury's retrograde, so there could be this tendency of needing to kind of clear out like patterns of thinking that could be damaging, patterns of thinking that are not getting you anywhere or keeping you kind of locked in a spiral in your mind, like circular thinking. We could maybe break out of some of that on this day. And especially with that talent triangle happening, I think you could break out of bad patterns on this day, break some bad habits. There's, some good energy to get stuff like that done on this day. So Mercury is our number 2 this 2-week period. Let's talk about our number 1. Have you deduced what it is? Have you picked up on the one thing I haven't talked about yet? The one planet? I think you'll get better at this the more Planetary Potion episodes you listen to. But let's see. Our number 1 planet this week, the most active planet in our Planetary Potion is, drumroll please, it's Neptune. Yeah, Neptune is having a wild couple weeks, and we are going to get totally into it. This episode is going to be a bit long, mostly because of Neptune and all the things I want to tell you about it. But let's just kind of run down some of the transits we've already talked about, which were Venus conjunct Neptune, March 27th, and then Mercury conjunct Neptune on March 29th. Remember, those are the two that brought about some like daydreamy energy and some like idealistic sort of imaginative stuff. And then on March 30th, we have what is considered one of the biggest transits of the whole year. Neptune is moving into Aries. This is a big, big deal. And I talked about it a little bit last episode, but we're going to really get into it now. So Neptune was in Pisces from 2011 until now. And that's pretty average. Neptune spends about 12 to 15 years in a single sign, which means that it takes it a while to make it around the whole zodiac. The last time Neptune was in Aries was 1875. So it was in there, the 1860s and the early 1870s was the last time. So because of this, Neptune changing signs can really define a generation. Neptune is considered a generational planet just because it moves so slowly, which means that anyone born in the next 11 years of Neptune in Aries is going to be, they'll have their Neptune in Aries. So this is a generational thing. This is something that all children born in the next 11 years will share. So Neptune is going to be here in Aries until 2036. This is a big transit. So to start, what I want to do is I want to take you back through the last several times that Neptune was in Aries and talk about some of the things that happened. And I'm going to see if you can sort of draw any conclusions on your own. And then I'll kind of give my feedback on what I think could happen in the next 11 years as a result of Neptune's shift into Aries. And let's just start. Let's just go back. So let's go back to the 1860s, shall we? So Neptune was in Aries from 1861 to 1874, and it ended up moving into Taurus for a while, then retrograding back. So 1875 was technically when it left Aries. And this lined up pretty well with the Civil War in America. It went into Aries actually the day after the Civil War was declared. And there was a lot of focus on civil rights and on human rights that were coming up around this time, not only just in America, but globally as well. There was a lot of advancement in science and medicine around this time. There were a lot of inventions. The periodic table of elements was discovered. There was photography that was making leaps and bounds in kind of its formation. Like photography already existed in a very like infant form back then, but there was a great advancement happening where more people started to become aware of photography as a medium during the period of Neptune and Aries. Alfred Nobel invented dynamite in 1866, which, if you've listened to the Unclouded Eye episode on the Nobel Prize, you will know all about the dynamite, which is an interesting episode to check out if you haven't heard it yet. And there are just a lot of different human rights kind of pushes that were happening. Like the Red Cross was formed in 1863, and there was just more of a focus on union building in the 1860s as well. So there were some advancements that were taking place, a lot of advancements. But one of the biggest things, of course, was the Civil War, at least in the United States. That was a huge defining moment for the 1860s as a whole, and the fact that it happened pretty much just as Neptune went into Aries is notable for sure. We also had the first ocean liner that was invented and built around this time in 1870. So there was a need to explore. Aries is the sign of exploration and of pioneering energy. And this was definitely a theme in terms of people wanting to travel more, wanting to see the world. There was more of like a traveling showmanship energy. There were a lot more of like sideshows and exhibits that were traveling around the world during this time. And we definitely saw more of a boom in the spiritualist movement as well. So more people that were wanting to believe in something greater and bigger. All right, let's go back even further. So if we go back, the last time Neptune was in Aries before the 1860s was 1697 to 1711. So this was a 14-year period that saw the turn into the 18th century. And this had a lot of unrest. There was the War of Spanish Succession that was happening in 1704. The Great Britain kind of union was formed around this time as well. So there was kind of a unification that happened between England and Scotland. And those were like a couple of the biggest things that I found that were happening, but there was definitely unification efforts and finding some middle ground between two sides that can't seem to get along. Starting to notice some patterns here. Let's go back even further. Before that, the last time Neptune was in Aries was 1534 to 1547. And this is especially notable because Pluto was also in Aquarius at this time, and Pluto is currently in Aquarius. So we are kind of getting a touch of more of the same planets. And this was the time when King Henry VIII declared himself as the head of the Church of England in 1534. So there was a lot of fighting that kind of came up during that time between the Protestants and the Catholics. There was a lot of religious persecution and unrest happening, and there was a Roman Inquisition to flesh out Protestants that happened in the 1540s. So a lot of war and violence that kind of came as a result of two sides that can't seem to get along. There was a lot of advancements made as well during this time. We had a lot of kind of like medical advancements that were coming about. We also saw a lot of scientific advancements. There was a lot of like astronomical things that were being learned as more people were using like crude telescopes to see the stars. And there was more of a focus on like pharmaceuticals. There's a really interesting website that I suggest you check out that I will note as one of my sources for this episode. It's Jessica Davidson's website, and she breaks this down even more. She goes into a lot of the different events that I'm talking about here. And I did do a little research beyond her website as well, but that one is a really good resource to dive into. And if we go back even further, the last time, I'm not going to go back beyond this. Don't worry. This isn't going to be like into the BC years, but we could go back that far. That's the cool thing about astrology. It's a clock, so you can just keep going. But 1370 to 1383 was the time before that. And that was right kind of in the middle of the Hundred Years' War. I don't think that we can really attribute the Hundred Years' War to this because literally it lasted 100 years. So we can't blame that on Neptune and Aries, but it happened to be kind of sandwiched in the middle of the Hundred-Year War. And it did kind of line up with the Catholic Church splitting in 1378, and the church was kind of under attack. There was a lot of Protestant versus Catholic themes that were still going on before the issues 200 years later with Henry VIII. And this would have been the first translation of the Bible into English in 1382. There was a lot of revolting happening between like the peasants against the like overlords and the landlords of the feudal lands. And that was actually the origin of the Robin Hood character, was in the 1370s, because this was a big theme for the kind of commoners at the time of like stealing from the rich to give to the poor and kind of a redistribution of wealth. Okay, so now that you've had your history lesson of Neptune and Aries, I want you to kind of think about it. And if you think of any themes that I didn't pick up on, please let me know. But basically what we're seeing here is a lot of two sides that can't get along. That was a big theme, right? And this kind of conflict of the people in charge versus the average everyday person. And so there are going to be themes that we see throughout all Neptune and Aries periods of uprisings, rises in activism, forming of unions, protecting the people, like the people needing to sort of step together to form like a cohesive bond to protect themselves. And a lot of these windows in time really altered the fabric of nations as we know them all around the world. And you might see a push for greater independence and individual independence specifically, because Aries is a very independent sign, but it's more about the individual and more about like going for the things that you as an individual want to accomplish. So there might need to be some level of conflict that has to happen in order to get that, in order to have greater freedom, in order to have greater individual freedom to be who we are in the world. There might need to be some conflict that comes up. I am not at all trying to fearmonger here. Like, there is not anything that's going to suggest that, you know, all of this is going to follow history and that we're going to necessarily have war as a result. But there could be a very big event that happens that is going to shift us away from this sort of capitalist, materialist mindset into something that's a little bit more spiritual, a little bit more awakened to the people taking back some of the power. It's not going to be overnight. Neptune moves slowly, and its effects are going to be continually felt over the next 11 years. So it's monumental, but it's an unfolding process that's not going to just suddenly be like, oh, it's March 30th and now everything's different. There could be some chaos, but ultimately, hopefully, it will lead to something better and brighter. And I think that it's interesting because Neptune has been in Pisces for the last 14 years, and Neptune in Pisces is really a very like interconnected, sort of boundaryless theme. And we saw like more of that with social media. The internet was becoming more of a prevalent thing. So everybody was kind of interconnected. We could suddenly be talking to somebody that was across the world. And we've just seen such a rise in that, where like it became such an everyday part of all of our existences, even more over the last 14 years. And there's also been more of a tendency toward escapism, which is another very Pisces archetype. And like, you know, doom scrolling, binge watching, just kind of getting lost in technology. So with Neptune moving into Aries, there might be less of that and more of a focus on the physical world and taking sort of impulsive actions to alter the fabric of the physical world. So ultimately, I do see power coming back to the hands of the people, but it's not going to just be given. It's going to have to be fought for, really, and done so in a fearless and courageous way. But I really love the fact that the Robin Hood story came about when Neptune was in Aries. I think that's a really beautiful archetype that we can kind of think about in terms of like a redistribution and everyone having a fair shot, everyone having the same level playing field to achieve their dreams. And that's a really beautiful thing because it's not really the reality for most people. So that's something special to kind of hope for. And Neptune and Aries will definitely bring change. I can tell you that. It will bring change. And we're going to have more significant shifts as both Uranus and Saturn are going to change signs this year as well. And Neptune in Aries will be fiery. It will bring along this powerful change. And again, we can't like pretend to know exactly what that's going to look like, but it's interesting to look back through history. And I do invite you to check out Jessica Davidson's website and also to do your own research on the last few times that Neptune was in Aries. Just kind of see if you can pick up on any themes. That's the best way to learn astrology, is just kind of seeing when was the last time this happened and what occurred. Because the more you can pick up on those patterns, the more you will understand astrology. And that's basically all it is just sort of like these repeating patterns and themes, but each time it's a little different because the other planets are doing something different as well. So you just kind of take like pieces of it. So it's not going to look exactly like it did in the 1860s because all the other planets are in different places. And it's not going to look exactly as it did in the 1500s because everything's in a different spot. But, it's just interesting to look for these patterns, these themes. One thing that we do see is more of a development of medicine and technology, more of an exploratory consciousness, and more of an effort to find middle ground, even if that middle ground has to come through some conflict beforehand. Civil war and the unification of Great Britain and just all of those other examples that I gave you. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know that this is kind of a lot, and it's going to be one of those things we're all going to have to sort of find out together. None of us have lived through Neptune and Aries. None of us know anyone who lived through Neptune and Aries. This is all new terrain for every single one of us on this earth. Unless you know some giant tortoises, they might be able to tell you some things about what they remember. All right, everybody. I hope you have a beautiful week, and you can find me at Unclouded Eye on Instagram and TikTok, and you can watch some of the older Unclouded Eye episodes on Haunt Me Official's YouTube. That's our production company. It's HAUNTME Official on YouTube. And you can find readings available at uncloudedeye.net. And again, Ty is going to be back with me very soon. We don't have a date quite yet, but we're going to be figuring that out soon for our return from hiatus. And we'll have some really fun themed episodes for you as well that will dive deeper into unique history and astrology. So hope you all have a beautiful couple weeks, and I will be back April 7th with your next episode.